federal immigration agent shot and killed a U.S. citizen mom just blocks from her home. The government says one thing, local officials and witnesses who saw the video say something completely different. And this wasn't even the first time. Here's what actually happened. Welcome back to part 2 of our ICE series. In part 1, we covered where ICE came from and what it was supposed to be. Now we're talking about what's happening right now. And we need to start in Minneapolis because what happened there is raising urgent questions about how this agency operates. On January 7, 2026, a woman named Renee Nicole Good was shot and killed by a federal immigration agent in South Minneapolis. Let me tell you a little bit about Renee. She was 37 years old, she was a writer and a poet, she was a mother of 3 children, and she was a U.S. citizen. That morning, she just dropped her child off at school. She was in her own neighborhood, blocks from her home, going about her normal day, and then federal agents encountered her. To understand what happened, you need to understand what was going on in Minneapolis at that time. Earlier this year, the Department of Homeland Security deployed about 2,000 federal agents to the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. They called it the largest immigration enforcement operation in U.S. history. Think about that scale for a second. 2,000 federal agents, not at the border, but in an American city for interior immigration enforcement. Local officials weren't given much warning. Residents woke up to see armed federal agents in their neighborhoods in unmarked vehicles conducting operations that looked more like military exercises than immigration enforcement. The stated goal was to target people with immigration violations and alleged fraud, but the scale and the tactics, that's what made this different from anything we'd seen before. So on the morning of January 7th, during this massive operation, ICE agents encountered Renee Good. Here's where the story splits into 2 completely different versions. The federal government says their agent fired in self-defense. According to their account, Renee tried to use her vehicle as a weapon against officers. They claim the agent had no choice but to shoot. But Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey reviewed the video footage of the incident, and he didn't just quietly disagree. He publicly disputed the federal narrative, calling it false. He said the video showed something very different from what federal officials were claiming. And local witnesses have backed him up. They said Renee posed no threat. They said she appeared to be trying to drive away when she was shot, multiple times. The details are horrific. Renee was shot in her vehicle. She died at the scene, just blocks from her own home, minutes after dropping her child at school. Her family and community are devastated and angry because this wasn't just a tragedy, it was a federal agent using lethal force against a U.S. citizen in circumstances where the official story doesn't match up what people saw. The shooting sparked immediate and massive protests in Minneapolis. Hundreds of people have taken to the streets. There have been vigils for Renee. There have been demands for accountability, for transparency, and for the release of the video footage. And here's what makes this even more urgent. This wasn't an isolated incident. According to reporting, Renee's death was at least the 9th time ICE agents had opened fire on people since September 2025. We're talking about a 4-month period, 9 shootings. Several of them had been fatal. Let me say that again. At least 9 times in 4 months, ICE agents discharged their weapons at people. This raises serious questions. Questions about training, questions about rules of engagement, questions about when lethal force is justified, and questions about accountability when things go wrong. Because here's the thing about federal agents using deadly force, there is supposed to be strict protocols. There's supposed to be oversight, and there's supposed to be transparency when a federal agent kills someone. But in many of these cases, including Renee's, the details have been slow to come out. Video footage hasn't been released publicly, independent investigations have faced obstacles, and the official narrative has been disputed by local officials and witnesses. This creates a crisis of accountability. Like when federal agents operate in local communities but aren't subject to the same transparency requirements as local police, or when their use of force decisions are investigated primarily by their own agencies. When video evidence exists but isn't released, That is a problem for everyone, regardless of how you feel about immigration policy. And it's important to note Renee was a US citizen. She wasn't the target of any immigration enforcement action. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time during a massive federal operation in her own neighborhood. Her death highlights something critical. When you deploy 2,000 federal agents into a city for sweeping enforcement operations, the impact goes far beyond the people being targeted. Entire communities are affected, and sometimes people do get caught up in these operations. Since Renee's death, there have been calls for federal investigations, for the release of body cam footage, for changes to ICE's use of force policies. Some members of Congress have demanded answers, and civil rights organizations have filed complaints. But as of now, many of those questions remain unanswered. So the video that Mayor Frey saw has not been released to the public. The full details of what happened, it's still disputed, and the accountability is still pending. This is what enforcement looks like at this scale. This is what happens when the priorities shift from targeted operations against specific individuals to massive deployments in American cities. Renee Good's children are growing up without their mother. Her community is mourning, and people across the country are asking, how did we get here? How did immigration enforcement become this? And the Minneapolis operation isn't just about that one tragic shooting. The scale of detention across the country has reached record levels. In part 3, I'm breaking down those numbers. Who is actually being detained and how that's different from what we've seen before. Because the data tells you a story that might surprise you. Follow for part 3.